Hello and welcome to the Bulwark podcast. I'm your host, Tim Miller. It is a Memorial Day. We're working. We're going to have an abbreviated show for you, and it's Monday, so that means I'm here with Bill Kristol. How you doing, Bill?
Fine, Tim. How are you?
Did you get to barbecue or anything? Any grandkids?
A little bit. They're of course too busy to actually see us because they're in extremely complicated baseball and other sports, mostly baseball and softball tournaments, which require multiple travel schedules and it's very complicated.
Are you an intense sports grandfather? Like, are
we
you
are
shouting at the field?
We are diligent and we enjoy it. I don't mean to make it sound like a duty. We go to McLean Little League a lot, but we don't go to the 2-hour travel games at Cal Ripken Field.
And you're not shouting at the umps?
North of Bulwark. We're not. We're against the parents shouting at the umps. We don't have, what's that thing that our daughters have, but I noticed some other grandparents have. Do you know about this? It's like not called pitch watcher, but it's game watcher. Anyway, you can some parent puts in the pitch by pitch, and you can get it on your little device, well, on your own computer, not a device. I'm just on your phone. So like if you're at work and you're missing the first 2 innings of the game, you can get the pitch by pitch of how your kid and all the other kids are doing. It's fine for the parents. I can see why they're very interested, but I think for the grandparents, Susan and I think that's a bridge too far,
I think that's a sign of mental illness.
Yeah,
even if you're a parent.
I don't even watch that for Major League Baseball, right? Let alone for, it's like.
I think it's okay to not know the pitch, the result of every swing, exactly. Every ball and strike. Anyway, we have some very unserious Memorial Day thoughts. I thought it's nice. I will do the honor as well here on the pod, Adam Kuiper and our folks at thebulwark.com, to bring a little bit of seriousness to Memorial Day. So it's not just talking about Donald Trump and his speech to the Army cadets about trophy wives and Alphonse Capone, to talk about what traditionally the point was of Memorial Day. We've got Oliver Wendell Holmes, his 19th century anniversary speech, really about kind of the Civil War veterans, where he talked about why Memorial Day is kept up. And he said it celebrates and solemnly reaffirms from year to year a national act of enthusiasm and faith. It embodies in the most impressive form our belief that to act with enthusiasm and faith is the condition of acting greatly. To fight out a war, you must believe something and want something with all your might. So you must do to carry anything else to an end worth reaching. I guess that is kind of the element that makes it challenging, to monitor the Donald Trump speeches, right? About whether there actually is a greater thing that we are reaching for rather than just, whatever, American muscle porn. I don't know if you have any deep thoughts about that on the Memorial Day holiday.
I don't have deep thoughts. I like the Oliver Wendell Holmes speech. There's some other great Memorial Day speeches and poetry, obviously, in fact. And don't you think it's more difficult maybe today because the most recent wars haven't been, ultimately been that successful, not due to any failings on the part of our veterans, but due to whatever world circumstances or failures of political leadership, or just maybe they weren't the right wars to fight. And that goes back, obviously, to Vietnam. I remember the Vietnam vets coming back. So, yeah, I think it's given it all a little bit more of a, I don't know what to say, a melancholy feel than Oliver Wendell Holmes pretty soon after the Civil War, maybe before Reconstruction had really failed, was kind of more in the enthusiasm side of it, which is fair enough. I mean, that's obviously a worthwhile sentiment too. I had a conversation with Michael Wood, our young friend from Dallas yesterday, and he reflected on Memorial Day. Will Selber has a good piece on their website, another Afghan vet. And I think that's tough seeing, you fought there and you had friends, you had people under your command and your platoons who died and were wounded, and you had Afghan friends who now Iraq, at least for a while, looked semi-successful. And even now it's not Saddam Hussein, right? But Afghanistan, sure. It's not good. And the way we got out was, of course, pretty bad. So anyway, I do feel like maybe it's always had this melancholy aspect. How could it not? You're honoring those who died. But
yeah, for sure. I mean, I do think, it's probably not the moment to rehash, all of our complex feelings about the, neocon American greatness agenda. But there's something to be said for the fact that, like, in contrast with what Donald Trump offered in Saudi Arabia, the idea that there is something worth fighting for, that we're fighting for a goal that is greater than just, mercantilistic, like American financial interests. And so even in failure, right, like there's a greater purpose. And I think this ends up getting lost both in Vietnam and Iraq at various points, but like at least as an attempt to create a greater purpose for the people that are serving, right? And I do feel that on the heels of the failed wars, and then now having somebody that's like the Memorial Day video today out from Trump and Hegseth is just like, America, like, we don't care about climate change or democracy anymore. We just care about war fighting. That probably works for some people, but maybe isn't quite in the Memorial Day spirit.
No, I totally agree. And just be clear, I mean, I would say I'm more convinced of the merits, in principle, of, let's call it the neocon greatness, true greatness, freedom, democracy, self-government agenda, than ever watching the Trumpist alternative. It's one thing to have the alternative be just to be more cautious and a little less, be more careful where we get involved. That's
sure.
A reasonable debate, obviously. We had many of those debates over the decades, but with the Trumpist agenda, really, for me, has made me more convinced of the correctness of, let's call it the freedom agenda, as a fundamental principle for this country, and also that abandoning it abroad correlates with abandoning it to large measure at home. Having said that, it also makes you maybe the experiences of the last decades make one more aware, or maybe one always should have been aware of the, just the inevitably tragic and limited successes of any agenda, including the freedom agenda. I'm more than ever, honestly, I've rethought a lot of things, as you have, I think, in our political lives. I got to say that the foreign policy agenda is a matter of prudence and particular choices. I've obviously done a fair amount of reflecting and rethinking, but it's a matter of its basic correctness for this country and for the world. I actually am more, that's why I haven't changed from being a Scoop Jackson Democrat more than 50 years ago to a Reagan and McCain Republican to a Zelensky Democrat, if I can use that term today.
Yeah, I got to hash this out. I texted Ben Rhodes and I was like, it's overdue for we to get you on the Bulwark podcast. We can hash this out with him. But in his recent book, I was like, again, some disagreements with the prudence of what had happened in the recent wars, but the thematics of Ben's book, which is basically that if you don't like the American world order, be careful about what's coming behind it, because it's not pretty. I was like, there's some Bill Kristolian elements in that. So anyway, I guess we'll let Ben.
I'll watch your discussion. I'll watch Ben's face when you put it that way to him.
Okay, we'll hash that out together in the next couple of weeks. Okay, Trump. I couldn't watch it. I can't. He was at the West Point graduation. I saw some pictures. He was in a MAGA hat. I saw a clip, as I mentioned earlier, where he was talking about trophy wives. I saw that he went golfing right afterwards. I don't know if there's much more to say about that, but I want to just give you an opportunity to share any thoughts you had.
I mean, the MAGA hat. Speaking to cadets on their graduation, it's so unbelievably inappropriate. Something they couldn't do and shouldn't do. Right? They're warned not to wear anything that's political. You could say, well, making America great, I guess, isn't political. It's not like having a Trump 2024 hat, but it is pretty political, obviously. So that was terrible. Biden in 2022. Who's, as we know, a little bit old and frail, stood and shook every cadet, if I'm not mistaken, every graduating cadet's hand. Now, you don't have to do that. I don't think every president or vice president or the Secretary of Defense who's spoken has done that, to be fair. But Trump just went off to play golf, as you say, after giving this totally inappropriate speech, in which he litigates various grievances against previous administrations. The one line that the trophy wives, it's really insane. But he also said something about how, I brought the military back. No one wanted to join the military under Biden. He's saying this literally to 1,000+ cadets who volunteered to go to West Point and serve when Joe Biden was president. And who's
point.
Right. I mean, it's so, I don't know what's the word even. I mean, it's grotesque and
narcissistic.
I mean, to the degree the staff wrote some of that, maybe they didn't write those particular lines. They're as bad as he is. Can I make that point generally? This is another kind of conversation, but they are horrible. I mean, they are just sailing through life being Trump staffers, colluding and cooperating and enabling the most grotesque policies and statements and degradation of the American life, and somehow they do not get called out on it enough. I feel like, I've sort of thought about that a little, and I don't even have the heart to go research exactly who's doing what. I don't even, do you know even who Trump's top speechwriter is or anything? I can't even. It's not like old administrations where one cared a little bit and thought maybe this one would be a little better than that one or something. I mean, they are all just going through doing I don't know. I feel like the enabling and colluding of so many thousands, tens of thousands of people, leaving aside everyone on the outside and all that stuff too. I find that a kind of astonishing. I thought a little bit about the guy who shows up and gives Trump the executive orders to sign, the really ridiculous. When Trump sits there at the desk with that ridiculous thing and he signs, whatever thing they give him. And I've often wondered, like, I don't even know who is that guy. And I'd like to someone should do a time. Maybe we'll get someone at the Bulwark to do this little backstory on. Is he proud to be giving Trump these orders that are, destroying our biomedical research and shattering our social fabric? I don't know. Maybe he is.
He is proud. Yeah. I'm blanking on his name right now, but I have read a little bit about him, and he is proud. And it's a self-selected group this time. And so, there is no really social comeuppance anymore. And so it's enough to really make you wish you believed in hell. So that's maybe something I'm going to work on over the next few weeks. I want to talk about the actual policies. Trump spoke on the tarmac about Putin and how something's really changed with that guy. And then put out this extensive bleat. I guess before I read it, just for context for folks who have been checked out over the weekend, the most intense drone and missile strikes of the entire war targeting Ukraine happened over the weekend, targeting civilian targets, obviously, in addition to military targets in cities across Ukraine. So just very, very ugly stuff. And this is the president's reaction to that. I've always had a very good relationship with Vladimir Putin of Russia, but something has happened to him. He has gone absolutely crazy, all caps. He is needlessly killing a lot of people. And I'm not just talking about soldiers. Missiles and drones are being shot into cities in Ukraine for no reason whatsoever. Likewise, President Zelensky is doing his country no favors by talking the way he does. Everything out of his mouth causes problems. I don't like it, and it better stop. This is a war that would never have started if I were president. This is Zelensky's, Putin's, and Biden's war, not Trump's. I'm only helping put out the big and ugly fires that have been started. So I've got a lot of thoughts on that bleat, but
there you go. You uttered a very interesting couple of tweets about it. So go ahead and begin.
Yes. Well, there's several thoughts. So for their point one is that he can't help but attack Zelensky and Biden. Like, he can't just simply say what Vladimir Putin is doing is wrong. And you notice when he says to Zelensky, there's just one time in here where it says, and it better stop. He's not saying to Putin, and the bombing of people better stop. He never says that. He says the stuff coming out of Zelensky's mouth better stop. So the one time where he kind of butches himself up to feel tough enough to tell somebody to actually change their behavior, he's talking to Zelensky, not Putin. I think that's important to note. It's also important, I think, to note the contrast between, again, as I mentioned, kind of the West Point speech in the video and Hegseth, where they're talking about how our warfighters are tough and we're not doing drag shows anymore, and we're like, our military is just going to be strong again, versus, again, this statement, which is pretty weak, frankly, which is essentially, not threatening Vladimir Putin with any military response at all, just kind of doing a psychoanalysis of him. But to me, the most interesting thing about it, and I think that this is genuine, like, he starts it by saying, I always had a very good relationship with Vladimir Putin. And I think there is a psychoanalysis element of this where, like, I don't think that's a put on. I think Trump thinks he and Putin had a very good relationship, because I don't think Trump has any real friends. I don't think Trump has any complex relationships with people that, are, have good and bad inside them, and where they've gone through struggles together and come out the other side. Like, I don't think he has any real friendships. I think his judgment of a good relationship is, if somebody's nice to me, we have a good relationship. If somebody's mean to me, we have a bad relationship. It's like a very childlike assessment of human nature. And so I think it's possible, as insane as this seems, I think it's possible that Trump really has been surprised by this and like thinks he and Putin were friends and thinks that something has changed in Putin and does not recognize that they never really had a relationship at all and that Putin's been using him the whole time. So that's my annotated reaction to his bleat. I don't know what you think.
No, I think that's very intelligent and interesting. I mean, I also think as you say, he's not doing anything. Putin can find some way to stroke Trump, and Trump will be back on board. Basically, we'll forget this in a week. The hopes of a lot of decent people who hoped their forces in that maybe Trump will come around. He'll realize that he can't afford to lose in Ukraine. It'll make him look bad, and there are people in the administration who want to do better. I mean, that's looking increasingly like a very slim hope that Trump is going to pivot. But, I just come back to, again, it's the enablers, right? I mean, there are half the Republican members of Congress voted for aid to Ukraine a year ago. They could do so again. There's a lot that Ukraine needs to combat this, particularly these larger and larger waves of Russian attacks. And the Russians have improved their capabilities, a lot of help from North Korea and Iran. The Ukrainians have massively improved their capabilities. Someone was telling me this the other day who knows this stuff in a way I certainly don't. What Ukraine has done over the last 2 years is a matter of actual just military kind of learning and upgrading is sort of jaw-dropping, maybe the U.S. in World War II would be a comparable example. But they can't do it all themselves. We could help them. I mean, that's just a fact. And so I'm sick of all a couple of people tweeted, it was very nice. Don Bacon, I think maybe one or two Republicans, the Republican member from Nebraska, very upset by what Putin's doing. Very bad. If only they were actually members of Congress who could, in Bacon's case, have refused to vote for the reconciliation bill if it didn't have aid for Ukraine, or if Trump didn't separately introduce, or if the leadership didn't introduce and guarantee a vote on aid for Ukraine. That vote would pass, incidentally. Johnson just has to let it come to the floor. Thune has to let it come to the floor. Maybe Trump would veto it. Maybe he wouldn't, incidentally, because I'm not so sure he wouldn't be overridden, and maybe it just to sign off on it. So again, the passivity of elected officials who have supposedly real responsibilities and supposedly real commitments and views on these things, I don't know.
I want to call out one person in particular on this point, Bill, and that's John Thune. I feel like John Thune has just gotten a really big pass, maybe just because he's like a generic Ken doll of a senator and people don't know him that well. He doesn't have kind of the reputation that Mitch McConnell does. He doesn't pop off on social media. And so I think that he gets to kind of hide in the background more than he deserves as the Senate leader. And like, I know John Thune. I've got to meet John Thune. I know people that worked for John Thune. Like, John Thune has traditional Republican, strong military, anti-Russia, pro-NATO views. At least he did his whole career, and he's been in there a long time. And John Thune was never had like a Rand Paul libertarian streak or one of the like a nationalist isolationist streak in him. John Thune was indistinguishable as a politician through his stated words and actions from a Mitch McConnell or from pre-Trump administration Marco. Like, that was John Thune, and like, he has paid lip service to being pro-Ukraine. He's always voted on the Ukraine side when things came to a vote. He could do this. Like, he could do it. Like, he could put up a bill, he could spearhead a bill through the Senate that provides more assistance and help to Ukraine right now. And I agree with you. I think it would pass. And I think it would pass with a veto-proof majority. And maybe depending on how the politics play out, whether Trump pressures people or strong-arms people, but I think it would. And the fact that he's not doing it is really shameful and weak. And I think it merits just being called out specifically.
No, that's well said. I mean, I'm glad you developed that point because, and Thune, Johnson gets beat up some because he's not, he's such a right winger and that's, the media isn't personally sympathetic, I wouldn't say, to Mike Johnson, but Thune's their friend. And so he gets, but Thune has in no way been more responsible than Johnson. And indeed, the one before the reconciliation bill, the one actual series of votes that were cast in either house that mattered were the confirmation votes, where Thune led the Senate Republicans in confirming Hegseth, Patel, Gabbard, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And I just, that thing, we fought those. I mean, we editorialized against the confirmations. We reported on it. It was kind of a big issue for us in November, December, January, which I'm glad we did our best. I wish we had more effect. But that we've sort of memory hold a little bit. I mean, that was a huge moment, I think, in retrospect. It really signaled that for the foreseeable future, there would be no opposition to the most easily opposable thing, the most obviously unqualified, the kind of craziest nominations. And they didn't oppose them. One or two or three Republicans opposed all those nominees. And now they're in office and doing a lot of damage, if I could just say, whether it's Hegseth or Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Tulsi Gabbard firing intelligence analysts who try to tell the truth. And it really was a marker of just, I guess even afterwards, I thought a little, well, maybe that's Trump's personal nominations. They didn't want to oppose Trump on something he cared about, but on policy, it'll be a little different. But no, the capitulation was thorough at the beginning. It has been thorough ever since.
Yeah, and just a simple way to put it is John Thune carried water for Tulsi Gabbard and has abandoned Zelensky in Ukraine. Like that's what he's done. No matter what he says or what he thinks his position is on private, or what he, maybe in private, he's made a phone call or two, but from a public standpoint, through 5 months of being leader, that's what his record is. Just one specific example of this, I sent you this article Michael Weiss flagged for me about these specific missiles, the response missiles that Ukraine needs to stop the ballistic missiles that are coming in from Russia. And as you've mentioned, Russia's stockpiled a bunch of these, and they were the ones causing a lot of damage this weekend. And Zelensky is saying that Ukraine will pay whatever it takes. Presumably Europe is helping with that. It's a Lockheed, I guess, that makes these. And the White House remains just non-committal on this, right? So again, there are specific things that we can do that are defensive to protect Ukrainian civilians, and Ukraine has said they will pay for them. That's not even aid, and yet we're still not doing it.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's shameful. It's shameful, really.
Shameful. I don't know much more to say on that. Okay. One more thing in Congress, and then we'll let everybody get back to their holiday after this uplifting listen. The big beautiful bill. I want to play. I was listening over the weekend. A listener flagged for me the All In podcast. For folks who aren't familiar, it's these 4 tech bros who, to varying degrees, have kind of thrown in with Trump. David Balsack, most famously, is actually working for Trump as his AI and crypto czar. Chamath Palihapitiya has been, I think, the most. He was an Obama-supporting tech guy who's gone full in with Trump, did a fundraiser for him. There are a couple other guys also. And I thought that it was interesting because they've been also water carrying on this show for the most part. Jason, who I had on this pod before the election, at times has been critical of Trump. But Chamath in particular and Sachs have just been carrying water for all of the most noxious things that Trump is doing, particularly on immigration. And so I thought it was noteworthy that now that we're kind of closer to these guys' wheelhouse when it comes to finances, what they're saying about the bill. And so I want to listen to Chamath here real quick.
You're going to see energy prices spike. You're gutting the number of electrons that will be available for things like AI. You're going to increase Medicare prices. And the math is wrong. So when you sensitize this thing to a 4.5 or 5 or 5.25 rate, so meaning not what the CBO used, but the real conditions on the ground, this thing is an albatross. And I think, unfortunately, for President Trump's agenda and for a MAGA movement, this is the worst of all conditions. The financial markets will punish this.
Yeah. I think that just kind of taking out the sort of ideological and the political side of this, the folks that are just looking at it as straight math have pretty alarming things to say about the bill that's going through Congress right now.
Yeah, I don't know these guys as well as you do, but maybe they could have weighed in a little bit like when it was in play and gotten a few things changed. Isn't like one of them was in the White House, but I guess, you just complain about it.
Well, the one that's in the White House was actually spinning for it, I should say, on this pod, but all of the other three were all.
And the others did make some calls. And of course, you can't really get any Republican to desert Trump or to insist on even some changes in it, though. I mean, there were particular aspects of it that are more damaging than others. No, it's all terrible. And the immigration policy, these guys should, I think, understand why it's important to have lots of immigrants in this country, but just from their point of view, probably especially high-skilled immigrants who will help us maintain our edge if we still have it. I hope we do.
Who maybe went to Harvard for
innovation, high tech, right, or any other place where they're busy. Harvard's just is obviously the tip of the sphere there. So I don't know. Are they weighing in a big way? I guess I haven't really heard that, but I welcome them if to the degree that they're tiptoeing away from total slavishness to MAGA. Of course, they still have to put it as if what's really bad about this, it's hurting the MAGA agenda. Not it's hurting the country. Okay, enough of but we should welcome. I know I'm too. We need to welcome all of our new allies, et cetera, et cetera.
I am not welcoming Chamath. I am just saying that it is interesting that somebody. I think it actually makes the point stronger. The fact that people that understand that you have to assume if you speak to them privately after their microdosing ketamine or whatever it is that people do in Silicon Valley these days when they're being candid, you have to assume that they are not thrilled with at least the high-skilled immigrant, that side, the useful to them side of the immigration policy, and the fact that people are being scared away from this country. And you might assume, maybe not, I don't know, that some of them would have issues with the research being gutted, since that is supporting, a lot of the high-tech and work that these guys are investing in, particularly in biomedical space and elsewhere. So, but like the fact that none of that like rose to the level where they're like, we have to, kind of wave a flag of caution, and that this did, I think just speaks to how bad it is on the merits. And because it is like, it is a pretty traditional Republican framework, I do think maybe like the intensity of the criticism is a little different than on the stuff that is uniquely Trump, like banning foreign students from Harvard or something, the El Salvador, right? But like, since this is like tax cuts and spending cuts, right? It's like traditional Republican stuff, but it's tax cuts and spending cuts just on steroids. And it is at a time when it's particularly ill-suited for, given what's happening in the broader economy. And just really quick, here's Jessica Riedel summing it up, that this bill costs more than the Trump tax cuts, the Biden CARES Act, and the Biden American Rescue Plan combined. They're going to spend a $52 billion to bail out farmers. That's tucked in here. And most importantly, and this relates to something Chamath said, it's already raising interest rates. Like, we have interest rates that are high for recent times. Every time I bring that up, some of our boomer listeners are like, interest rates are nothing compared to 1978. Okay, but it's high. It's high for recent times. The interest rates already are, and you saw it in the bond market last week. Chamath goes on and talks about this at greater length in that podcast, and you're seeing it now that it's so irresponsible fiscally that it is gonna keep pushing interest rates higher, which has an impact on everybody. So anyway, I just think that's the interesting part of why kind of it's worth flagging the criticism here.
No, I agree with that. Actually, I myself have been a little too. This is just another stupid Republican bill that's cuts taxes predictably and doesn't cut spending, and the only spending it cuts is for poor people. The food aid, and especially Medicaid, obviously. But I think it's a good point that it's one thing to pass this in 2017 when after the Great Recession and after we'd fixed, I think, a lot of the financial sides of things, we'd had a slow growth for 6 years. We had low interest rates. You could afford to pass a maybe somewhat foolish bill, but the economy chugged along. Honestly, if you looked at some big chart from 2013 to 2020, you would barely notice as a macroeconomic thing. I bet that tax bill kind of was just the same rate of growth, right?
Yeah, basically.
But doing it when you're in a much more precarious position. Well, he inherited a good economy, mind you, but with interest rates especially being high, inflation not quite under control, and the pandemic leading to a lot of more debts, deficit spending. I think it's probably riskier. And I think the interest rate focus is right. I mean, just borrowing at 5%, the federal government borrowing trillions of dollars or billions of dollars, at least hundreds of billions at 5% as opposed to at 2% or something, really changes the math, right?
It changes it significantly. So, okay, we'll keep monitoring this. I was going to go to the Senate. We'll see. I don't have a lot of hope for my man John Thune to really find his old, fiscal hawkish.
If you invite, you should maybe
muscles.
Text his, email him today and say, "Look, we were pretty tough on you today, and if you want to come on, have a respectful half-hour discussion. It'll be a test of you, but it'll be good."
We should do that. I will email John Thune. I'm not counting my chickens on that one, but we will. We'll send John Thune an email, see if he wants to come on the pod and hash it out. Maybe I'm missing something. Maybe there is some really smart, considered policy happening behind the scenes when it comes to our fiscal situation and the war in Ukraine. I'm not optimistic about that, but hope springs eternal. Bill Kristol, thank you so much. Have a great Memorial Day.
You too, Tim. Thanks.
Everybody else will be back here tomorrow for another edition of the Bulwark Podcast, and we'll see y'all then. Peace. Hey guys, it's Tim and Sarah. We're here with my frenemy, John Lovett from Love It or Leave It. June is Pride Month, and we're going to be live in D.C. on June 6th for World Pride for a very special live show fundraiser featuring the three of us, plus some gay special guests.
Crooked and the Bulwark will be donating the proceeds from this fundraiser to the Immigrant Defenders Law Center to support Andre Romero, the makeup artist who the Trump administration wrongly disappeared to El Salvador and who is currently being held in Sakat.
Go to crooked.com/events.
And we will see you all on June 6th.